A landlord in Washington state says that a tenant has taken over her property, and at the same time, the governor of Washington is finally letting the eviction moratorium expire. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have two interesting articles for you today, and they're coming out of Washington State. Okay, so as I said before, Washington State is one of the most progressive states in the entire country, and they extended their state eviction moratorium to last long beyond the federal eviction moratorium. Even after the federal eviction moratorium was thrown out by the Supreme Court, they kept that state eviction moratorium in place. And it's even worse in places like Seattle, where they have a local eviction moratorium that's going to continue on until 2022, I believe. So yeah, it's pretty bad up there for landlords. But anyway, there's a property owner up there in Tacoma, and man, she's just struggling very bad with a tenant who hasn't paid and has been protected by this eviction moratorium. So now that it's over up there, hopefully she's able to get this tenant out of there. And speaking of it being over, the Governor Inslee up there in Washington State decided not to extend it. I'm actually kind of surprised. I thought for sure that this would be one of those places where they decided to extend the state eviction moratorium pretty much indefinitely. But once again, I'm pleasantly surprised. Now, that doesn't help those landlords in the jurisdictions such as Seattle, but it does help the landlords in the rest of the state. But before I get into those two articles, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think you want to see on this channel, okay? I'm bringing you articles about the eviction moratorium, rent control, tenant protections, anything that's of interest to landlords, and I'm going to work to keep bringing you the most up-to-date information every day. So, the first article I have for you today, it's coming from mynorthwest.com, and it says, Tacoma homeowner says tenant has taken over her property. Yep, this is another bad landlord-tenant situation, okay? Tenant basically trashes the property, landlord stuck footing the bill. So let's get into it. For small-time landlords, it is a situation right out of a nightmare. A tenant all but takes over a property, breaking the rules of the rental agreement, trashing the house and yard to the point that the city declares it a nuisance, and refusing to leave even after being served with a notice to vacate. But that is the situation in which one Tacoma landlord says she found herself. Tacoma homeowner Robin Kelly has rented out her family's longtime house, which her grandparents bought in the 1960s and she purchased in 1980, to the same tenant for 5 years. At first, things went well. After a while, though, she said that the tenant began breaking not only the rules of the lease, but also city ordinances, such as parking commercial vehicles on the property and on the curb. Then, an abundance of trash, from broken hot tubs to a homemade fire pit and even a broken down bus, began piling up. There's also extensive damage to the interior of the house. Yeah. Man, I've gone over several of these stories like this, right? And this seems to be pretty common, okay? So we have the tenant in place. The tenant is causing all sorts of damage. And guess what? With these eviction moratoriums in place, these landlords couldn't get them out. And the worst part is the tenants know this, okay? They're using the system to their advantage, and they're taking advantage of landlords who don't have that much money. This lady here, it sounds like she bought this house back in 1980, so she's owned it for 40 years. And, just now the place is getting trashed. And they actually do have a picture here on the article of the before and after of the house. And you can just see this huge pile of trash on it. So I'll throw it up over here in this corner so that you can get a good view of what this lady has to deal with. But let's continue. The property has grown to be a great big huge junk pile. The garage is so full that the garage door could not be shut, Kelly described. The trash has come out into the driveway, all the way up to the fencing. Late last year, the city of Tacoma declared the property a nuisance and notified Kelly that she, as the owner, would be fined if she did not clean it up. She said that she made numerous attempts to get the renter to clear the trash and tried to help him with it, but was unsuccessful. What those meetings did result in was her fearing for her personal safety. I'm afraid of him now, Kelly said. I'm afraid to go over there, and the neighbors are afraid of him. I will not go into the house with him by myself. Yeah, now it sounds like the tenant wasn't happy that she came over, saying, hey, we got to clean up this trash or I'm going to kick you out. and either threatened her or whatever, right? But if she's owned this house for 40 years, it sounds like she's an elderly lady, and there's no reason to be threatening an elderly lady with anything, okay? So that's completely ridiculous. The tenant is in the wrong here, and I feel bad that she doesn't feel safe, but to me, if she doesn't feel safe in the property, the tenant's trashing the property, this is a perfect example of a tenant who needs to be evicted as soon as possible, okay? When the city of Tacoma showed up to the property for an abatement in September, staffers determined the situation too dangerous to continue with the cleanup efforts and left. Now, I wonder why they found this situation too dangerous. Was the tenant in there threatening them as well? Okay, this is out of control. Okay, this is completely ridiculous. This is why I don't believe that any sort of eviction moratorium should have been in place, because keeping tenants like this in a property, I mean, it's just wrong that we have somebody who's threatening landlords, threatening the city, creating a nuisance for the neighbors, trashing this property. I mean, this is completely ridiculous. Kelly has sent the renter notices to clean the property or vacate it, and he has told her in writing that he would be out of the house, but he still remains in place. She added that he has not paid rent for over a year, but she has not held him to that because of the pandemic. He has applied for rental assistance, which would have made eviction on the basis of non-payment of rent not possible during the eviction bridge, though that ends this weekend. So yeah, I'm recording this on Sunday. So the eviction bridge, it ends today, okay? And that, the fact that he applied for rental assistance, that was the only thing really that was protecting him, because as bad as he has treated this property, as bad as he has treated this landlord, he really needs to go, okay? And a year of not paying rent is just making things even worse for this lady. So let's go into this second article here, and it's going to talk about how the Washington State Eviction Moratorium is ending, okay? And this article is coming from theolympian.com, and it says, Governor Inslee lets Washington State eviction limits expire Sunday. And Sunday is today. So it looks like Washington State is finally in the clear. After more than 18 months of pandemic-driven eviction limits, Governor Jay Inslee is allowing the latest version of Washington's eviction moratorium to expire Sunday. That move will open the door for an influx of new eviction cases and test key tenant protections for the first time since the pandemic upended the legal process last year. We have to have some end to the moratorium. You can't have an economy ultimately where just nobody pays rent, said Inslee at a press conference Thursday. Well, why wasn't he saying this stuff 6 months ago? You just can't have an economy where nobody pays rent. Well, yeah, no duh, okay? This is what landlords were saying a year ago. But you thought, oh, we can just keep extending it. No, the same thing that's true right now was true a year ago, and yet you kept extending it anyway. So we need to get back to normal. I hate that you're just saying this stuff now, because if you believed that, then you would have never extended it in the first place, okay? Politicians frustrate me a lot. Soon after the coronavirus hit, Inslee used his emergency powers to halt most evictions. The details of the ban shifted throughout 2020, but generally allowed evictions only in cases of safety risks and when landlords said they wanted to move in or sell their property. This fall, Inslee loosened those rules. He replaced the moratorium with a bridge proclamation that still stopped some evictions for non-payment of rent in certain parts of the state, but allowed evictions for other reasons. The expiration of that policy on Sunday means landlords can seek more evictions of tenants who fell behind on rent during the pandemic, provided owners go through newly required steps, such as offering the tenant a payment plan. So yeah, they put more steps on the landlords now to actually go through the eviction process, like offering a payment plan. Are you kidding me? A payment plan? So the tenant owes $1,000 a month, and the tenant owes you $10,000 on top of that. So now, even though they haven't been able to pay you in the last year, and they owe you $10,000, now they're going to be able to pay the $1,000 a month and make payments on that $10,000 they owe? How? It's not going to be possible for the majority of tenants. Okay, so landlords shouldn't even have to go through that mess at all. Now, if they want to, if the tenant actually is able to come up with that and the landlord is willing to accept it, fine. but that's up to the individual landlord. They shouldn't be forced to by the state. So yeah, this is completely ridiculous. But I am glad that the state of Washington finally is ending their state eviction moratorium, because simply put, landlords, they wouldn't be able to survive there much longer, and especially outside of places like Seattle. Now, I expected Seattle to be, one of the last places in the entire country for the eviction moratorium to end. So that's not surprising. But, outside of there, I know that they're a lot less progressive in the rest of Washington state. So hopefully those landlords in the rest of the state are finally able to get back to business.